feature demo. This is a long-awaited feature for our non-technical PPO users to build their own PPO reports and dashboards through what we're calling our BI API, or more simply, our BI connector. So this feature allows you to connect your PPO data to your BI reporting tool of choice. And that tool can be something as easy as Excel, or other tools like Tableau or Power BI or Click, or one of those that you might be already using in your organization. So this demo is going to cover the basics of how this feature works, and it's going to be covered by the three of us. So I'll take you through the logical access control, how to give your user groups different access to be able to make use of it. So I did mention that it is a non-technical feature, so you could give access to this feature to your project managers or any other of your users within your existing user groups. I'll also show you how to create an API key, and then I'll hand over to Daniel, who he'll cover using this from Excel. So connecting from Excel, and Guy will cover the Power BI portion, and we'll end off with the Q&A session. So before we get going, I just want to check. We've got everyone here. We can all see my screen, and we're happy to jump into it. Any questions, you can, of course, use the chat. The three of us will moderate and take questions, but we're happy for you to post it in the chat, and we'll get to them all at the end. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just switch over to, I'll stop share. I'm just going to quickly move to a demo instance of PPO. So give me 1 second. Okay, so there we have it. So I'll be working on a demo environment of PPO as a user, as you normally all would. So I've got a username and password. I'll be logging into the environment, so into my instance of PPO, and you'll see that under the administration menu, we have a menu item here for reporting. So there's a category for reporting, and within that is report mailers. Right now, I don't have access to the BI API feature, and what I'd need to do is to give my user group access to it. So I am going to go, I'm currently sitting in a PPO administrator user group. So I'm going to go to my administrator user group, look at the access, and you'll see that there is right at the top, administration, function name is Business Intelligence API, and I now want to give my user group access to this feature. Just FYI, this functionality was introduced to all clients' instances, so you will all already have this feature available. If you don't see it, it's because your access has not been updated for the user group for which you sit in. If I go back to my administration menu and look again under that reporting heading, I now see the Business Intelligence API option. If I click on it, it will take me through to the service information about this API. So exactly what this feature allows me to do. Okay, so we can see that this page will tell me a little bit about the feature, so the API keys, how I go about creating that, the export settings, but I'll touch on that as we go through it. The most important thing that you need to see is the API URL. So yeah, under API information, you have this little button that allows you to copy the URL, which you will need for when you connect to your BI reporting tool. So I will copy this URL now. I've just got a notepad here on the side that I want to keep. So I'm going to paste this onto my notepad for the URL because I'll need this just now, and Daniel will show you how you'll use this. And there you'll see all the existing APIs that have already been created. So these API keys relate to your instance as a whole. So I've mentioned that various users can have access, and you as your PPO administrators will determine which users or user groups need access, and any user with access can then go and create their own API key, which allows them to connect to PPO's data. So I'm going to add my API key. I'm going to give it a name, and of course this name is important so we know exactly who's created this API key, and I'm just going to put in brackets that it's me that's done that, so I've created my key. Once I submit and create that API key, you can see it's been successfully created, and here it's important to note that this is security related, so you'd need to keep your access key. This serves as your username for your BI reporting tool, so I'm going to make a note of that. And of course, my secret key, which in most cases is your password on your BI reporting tool. So I am safeguarding this right now for when I'm going to use it. This secret key is only shown to you once, so if you don't take note of it, you won't be able to see that key. So I've copied it and I'm going to use it just now when we connect to our reporting tool. You can already see that I've just created it. I haven't used it yet, so that's my key that I can now connect to my reporting tool. The export settings, so it's important to note that these export settings relate to all keys that have been created. So currently this API is enabled, so this information will run daily on schedule, which cannot be changed for the moment. This is the daily schedule that will run roughly 3 o'clock in the morning. So you can see that the next export is planned for, it happened this morning, so the next one will happen tomorrow morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. These are all the entities for which I am going to be extracting data to my reporting tool. These entities that are selected relate to all the keys that exist. So if any of the users that have access go and change this, it will of course impact the export for all of the keys that exist on this instance. So bear that in mind. Whatever has been selected, if new keys get created and these entities get either deselected or added, it will impact the next run. Once that's happened, you would just submit it, and that saves the API key that has now been created. And it's as easy as that to be able to activate access to the various user groups, create a key, get your username and password, which will then be used in your reporting tool. You connect to that reporting tool as a once-off with that key, and then the export will continually run every day and update your information accordingly. So you'll also be, as administrators, thinking about giving access. So you can see I'm in a PPO administrator user group, therefore I have access to the full administration menu. Because this feature is aimed at non-technical users, there's no concerns with you granting access to a project manager user group as an example. So if I just jump over, I've got another window here. So I just want to quickly show it to you. So if I were to show a project manager user group. So I'm currently sitting in a project manager user group and I've got a different username and password here. You can see that. I now have access to the administration menu, but only to the BI API, so the Business Intelligence API. So if you as administrators are concerned about giving access to this feature, don't be, because it will only just give them access to that feature and not the full administration functionality that you guys all have. And that's it for giving access, creating the API key, and I'll hand over to you, Daniel, just to cover the connecting via Excel. Any questions before I hand over to Daniel?
Yeah, hi, Cynthia. Sorry.
Okay. Go for it.
I was just going to ask. I went into the training instance rather than live just to see if I could sort of add it as you were talking. Sort of after how long after I've added the access to, say, the PPO administrator user group, should I see that business intelligence sort of API, link appear under my admin menu drop down?
It will appear immediately, but it is important to note that it won't be available on your training instances. It is only available on your live instances. So not for training.
Fine.
I'll do it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So my question is, for the API keys, let's assume we've got two BI platforms. We've got Power BI, we've got Tableau. Within those two platforms, we've got 20 users each. So for the access key, are you going to have to create two access keys for the two platforms or 40 access keys for the 40 users?
It's not necessary. The same API key will work regardless of the platform that you use. So you can use that same key for Excel. You can use the same key for Power BI. It's not necessary.
And the point you made about so when you're creating new access keys, where you select the data entities, is it possible or is there any plan to be able to customize the view or the selection of data entities based on the given access key? So it doesn't always have to apply to every access keys for the elements to select.
It is something that we're considering. It might be a enhancement that we make in the future, but for now, it is applicable to all keys. So the entity selected will be applicable to all keys.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? None. Okay, happy. Daniel, you can take over.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to quickly share my screen, pull up Excel. So thanks, Darren, for walking us through the logical access control mechanism. You guys should all see an Excel workbook in front of you. So we're going to start with a basic BI tool, something that's commonly within environments, and that is Excel. And we're going to do some basic BI reporting, build a pivot table and a pivot chart and talk through that. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk about Excel versions and which versions support the OData feed or allow you to connect to the BI API and PPO. So if you're on Excel 2016 and above, you should have no concerns there or any additional add-ins that you need to install. If you are on a prior version of Excel, for example 2013, you'd need to install an add-in called Power BI, oh sorry, not Power BI, Power Query, in order to access that OData feed. Now we're going to go through the steps from Excel, and then we're going to navigate over to PPO, to that page that Taryn gave us access to in order to create our own key. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to select my data ribbon within Excel. I'm going to select get data. I'm going to select from other sources, specifically an OData feed. When I click on this, it's going to give me a basic and advanced option. We're going to stick to a basic method throughout our demonstration today. And the first prompt or the first input box that we need to fill in is our URL. So I'm going to navigate through to PPO. And because Taryn's now given us access to this page, I can access the BI API page. And from here, I can copy the URL. So I've copied it to my clipboard. I'm going to move over to Excel and paste it into the URL field. Now it's going to ask me for an authentication mechanism. We're again sticking with the basic authentication mechanism. And in this situation, it's asking us for a username and a password. So back to PPO, I'm going to create my API key, and I'm going to call it Excel Webinar Demo. There I've created my API key, which then gives me access to my access key, which is my username, which I've copied to my clipboard. I'm going to paste in my username, going back to my secret key, which I can only view once. Then I'm going to use that password and connect. Now, when you connect to the OData feed, it's going to give you what we call the navigator page. Now, the navigator page is going to show you all the entities that were set up in the export settings. And these entities can be viewed. So if I were to click on them, for example, projects, it then develops or gives us a preview of the data that we are going to be pulling down from PPO. In my demonstration, and this talks to, I think, a question that Victor, you popped up in the chat. In my demonstration, I'm not going to be making use of all the entities that have been set up in the export settings. I'm specifically only going to pull down what I need in order to build my pivot table and my pivot chart, and that's specifically from an entity perspective is our projects entity and our employees entity. Now, when I click on load, you'll see a query window pop up on the right-hand side. This is now busy retrieving the data from the relevant entities, and the time it takes to retrieve the data is dependent on how many records there are in the entity and obviously how many data fields are within that entity on PPO. But now that the queries have successfully completed, we can see 17 rows or 17 projects have come down or been pulled down from PPO, and 19 employees have been pulled down from PPO. Our next step now hinders, or our next steps after this, now hinders on your basic knowledge of pivot tables and pivot charts. With a slight alteration. So I'm going to go to the insert ribbon and I'm going to click on pivot table, specifically the arrow, but this time I'm going to select from data model. I'm going to, let's quickly put it in the top left hand corner in our existing worksheet, and there's our pivot table ready for construction. On the right-hand side, you'll notice the pivot table fields that we can select from. There's two entities that are displayed. These are the two that we selected on the navigator page. For the interim, I'm just going to use the project entity, and my desire is to show a count of projects per phase and per status. So simply, we're going to drag our phase field into our rows. We're going to drag our status field into our columns, and then we're going to take the ID, which uniquely identifies the project, and I'm going to put that into our values. Now you might stop and think to yourself, I'm finished with my pivot table, but those that are familiar with our PPO dataset, we have a filtering mechanism in place that allows us to archive projects, and that hinders on the value of an active field. So this active field I've now dropped into my filter bar, and I'm always going to set it to show values true. So always show us values that are true. Remember, your data refreshes daily. So if we were to, for example, archive a project this afternoon and your data refresh tomorrow, you'd want to see that that has dropped off the list. If you didn't have that active filter in, you wouldn't see that. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is most portfolio reporting excludes admin projects. Admin projects are used to facilitate admin functions within the tool. So we can drop it into our filter bar there, and we can specifically say only show us projects that are not admin projects. There was one project, if we actually just flip back to the all view, you'll notice there's a phase of closing, a project that was completed. That was actually an admin project. So if I set that to false, that completed line then drops off our table. Then from here, we can simply go, because we're on the pivot table analyze ribbon, we can go and insert a nice simple bar graph based on our pivot table data. So there's our bar graph that we've implemented, showing us the count of projects per phase, per status. We've introduced some basic filtering mechanisms on the active flag, the admin project flag. Now, you might want to step it up a level, and that is perhaps you want to introduce some ownership into your reporting or your bar graph that you're doing. And I'm going to demonstrate how you do that with the project manager field that is situated on the project entity. If I were to take this project manager field and I were to drop it into my axes, you'll notice that we are getting a numeric value for that field that we've just dropped into our axis. This numeric value is the identifier or a unique identifier for an employee. Now we don't want 19 and 21, we actually want the individual's name and their surname to appear there. So it's as simple as I'm just going to deselect the project manager ID and I'm going to use that additional table that I brought in, that employees table. And this time I'm going to take the display value. The display value of the employees is simply put their name concatenated with their surname. So I'm going to drag and drop that display value into our pivot table. Now the data that we are seeing is incorrect. What it's doing is it's duplicating our data set for each employee within the employee table. But note within our pivot chart fields, we've got a pop-up here that says a relationship can now be defined between the two tables or between the two entities. So we're going to create a relationship between the two. We click on create. We're going to select our employee table and what uniquely identifies an employee, which is the ID. We're going to use our related table, the projects, and we're going to indicate we are looking at the project manager ID. When I click on OK, you'll notice the data set now aligns. Instead of the key value of 19, we now have a value for Adrian de Villiers as the project manager. Perhaps there's no longer a need to see the phase within our pivot chart, so I can just drop the phase out. And now we have a count of projects per PM across each of the relevant statuses with our filter control still embedded in our view. And that's as simple as we could go with regards to demonstrating how to use the connector, generating that access key, connecting to the data source through the OData feed, and then using that connection to pull down the data and use that data to then create the desired view. I mean, we created 3 various pivot charts throughout our demonstration, and you can continuously use that data model within your Excel workbook. You could save it, it would refresh the following day. Don't forget about those filters or that filtering mechanism that PPO has built in. So I'm going to hand over to Guy. I'm going to stop sharing on my side. I don't know if
Before you
there's
do, Daniel,
questions.
yeah, there's a question from Anne for you. With health, can you include the colors?
Yes, you can include the colors. So what we've done with the data set is instead of returning an integer value, we return the text value. Sorry, I'm mumbling technical jargon. We return the value green or red or amber, so you could color that within a graph too.
Thank you.
Hi, I've got a question. So for the data entities, is it possible to expose the metadata of the underlying attributes of the entities, so that if you're creating a report, for example, maybe a new starter, you have a better understanding of what you're using? And also, is there a way to see, because different companies will have different volume of data, to see the size of the data entities before you start loading them into an application like Excel, so you know what you're working with in terms of refresh and also the performance?
Yes, so I think so the size is indicated like, for example, in Excel as a BI tool within the preview page, you get an indication of how many records are going to be pulled down. The metadata, I would assume, can be used considering you can view a relationship model with a more powerful BI tool, if I recall correctly.
Daniel, to help Abdul as well, I mean, PPO inherently has a data fields report,
Now, not all users on this call might be aware of it. Maybe you or Taryn could just demo it quickly. What that report does, Abdul, if you've never seen it before, is it's effectively the documented metadata of PPO. So under administration, I think it is, under reporting, administration, it's the data fields report. That is the metadata. So if you're not familiar with PPO and you are doing this, then that would be a starting point, is to access this. You can look at the report on screen, or you can do an Excel version of it. And this is the documented metadata. This is real time, that report, obviously, like everything in PPO. So as on how you change the data structure, there it is. So if Daniel was just to filter on that quickly and say, look at the, I don't know, project entity, the one he was working on. There is your metadata, the field name, the caption, the description, the type of field it is, whether it's free text or percentage or variances. One of the things we've noticed in our testing and playing with this new feature is to get the value out of it. I mean, you've got to have a good idea of what your data is that you're having. So, you know, while a project manager may be able to access this, I mean, you really need to get a good understanding of the data that you have in your system to really get the benefit of it. So that is something that I think you should just consider when you decide, you know, who's going to be building these reports or those type of things, because understanding that data model, I think, is important.
Yeah, and thanks. This is a very, very useful report. And in terms of performance, especially, have you been able to like test how, for example, any tool you use like Excel is able to undo an entity that's got a lot of records, let's say hundreds of thousands if possible, just to see how it undo it and it refreshes the data on the BI platform?
Yeah, so I mean, before releasing this feature, Abdul, we did quite a bit of testing across various platforms with various data sets. We specifically selected some of our clients with large data sets. We know they are. We know we have clients with, you know, 4,000 projects plus. They've been clients for 5 or 6 years, 10 years in some cases, so you times that all up. So we did quite a bit of significant stress testing with this. I think it's important to mention as well, when the data gets refreshed on a daily basis, that data is actually sitting in a BI data store and not in your live production environment. So once that data has been refreshed and it sits there at 3 o'clock in the morning, it has no connection to your live environment. So the users on the live environment will not be impacted, which is one of the reasons why we're doing that daily restore and why we do it outside of business hours, is to get the data into a BI data store for you to access with your API and key and do that, but not directly impact on your live production environment when you may have users working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Over to you, Guy. Guy will cover connecting to Power BI.
Okay, so you should all see.
Sorry, I'm very sorry. Just a final question on connection. So I'm not sure how the subscription is going to be set up for access to this connector, but is it going to be by how are we going to be charged? Is it by refresh or the number of reports or the number of the size of data? How does it work? Or once you have access to the API, you can use it as much as you like without having a cost implication?
So that's the best question you've asked today so far. So with everything at PPO, I mean, all version upgrades of PPO are part of your subscription. So this is a new feature. We're deploying it to every single client free of charge, and it does not cost you additional. We're not charging you for the feature, and we're not going to charge you for the use of the feature. So every time we decide to upgrade PPO, and you would have noticed quite a number of upgrades that we're doing in the last month, and we've got some exciting ones planned coming up as well. We're putting our foot down on the pedal to release quite a bit of functionality that we've been working on for a while. So that's all part of your subscription. No additional cost, no fee, not per usage. Just bear in mind that the terms and conditions of PPO have what's called fair usage policy. So we obviously don't, we need to monitor and make sure that there's not millions and millions of API keys created for every single client and every user downloading everything all the time. But I don't suspect that will happen. I mean, this is something that I think would be well managed by our clients and providing the access. But there's no additional cost, there's no usage fee. That's part of your day-to-day subscription. As an existing PPO client, feature upgrade, part of your subscription.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we plan to sort of finish at about 1:45, I think. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through this. This is by no means a Power BI demonstration. I'm not a Power BI expert. I actually only started using it a month ago, the first time when we started some detailed testing on this. So for those of you that have used Power BI, this is the desktop app, and it's the same connection mechanism that Daniel used in the past. I've done exactly the same thing, get data, OData feed, and being a Microsoft product, the screens and the connection work exactly the same. So I'm not going to demonstrate that. I have already connected this using my API key. And just to answer the question that I think Victor asked on the chat, I'm not sure you all saw it. These connections that you create save themselves within Excel and within Power BI. So within this current file, there is my connection, and you'll recognize that URL is the same one Daniel used, and the permissions, the usernames and passwords have already been saved. So as long as I've got this working file in Power BI, that connector is there, and that's available to us. I think it was Dave or somebody asked on the chat about, is it persistent? So the API keys are persistent, they stay forever, but in our testing and our playing, we had some people that deleted keys that other people were using. So those type of things you must just be aware of. And obviously it was just a matter of going into this setting, editing my position, permission, should I say, and putting a new username and password in there. So those are saved, they're together with this file, and then they're accessible. So what I went and did was something similar to Daniel, was I was trying to assess sort of what could I do with this connector. On the right-hand side, for those of you that use Power BI, I pulled in the project table, I pulled in the issues table, I pulled in the employees table, and I pulled in the cost table. So I wanted to look at those 4 tables. And what I was able to do was to build a Power BI report, which effectively had these different elements. So I looked at governance, and that was a question asked by Anne, and I think it's an important question. Obviously, in PPO, some of the data fields have a health indicator type. So if I just flip to another view, which is over here, what you'll see here to answer Anne's question is, if you have a field type which is RAG, so it's that red, amber, green traffic light, like governance or like those things, for example, then we're not giving you the keys that relate to that. If you were to use the backend API, we're giving you the red, amber, green. So we've resolved those keys already. It's going to go red, amber, green. And what you're able to do in your BI tool or Excel, and like I did over here, was just color coded. So I wanted the red's red and I wanted the green's green. But we've resolved those keys for you. Other custom list keys, things like phases and statuses and departments, those we've also already resolved those keys. And using a tool like Power BI, which is obviously a little bit more sophisticated than something like Excel, then I can already start to understand that data model as well. So if I just move this out over here, so yeah, I could see that's a sum field and that's a date field. So you can already start to ascertain some of the data field types just looking at the underlying data model. But this is a Power BI feature. Obviously, it knows what data is sitting in these specific ones. So what I was able to do very quickly was I was able to create this view, similar graph to what Daniel did. So, projects per phase. I looked at governance. So I used my governance indicator on my project entity. I wanted to see what was red, amber, green. I used my progress variance, which is a field on the project entity, and I saw that my entire portfolio is 50% behind where I should be. The project health, I then pulled in my costs and I looked at my budget cost per month as well as my actual spend. And then I did slices. Those of you that have used Excel quite a bit or Power BI or those type of tools, this is a general slicer. So we would be able to say, well, I'm only interested in IT projects. And then obviously all the graphs and the analysis would change. So just introducing the slicer element, and this was just effectively pulling it in. To make it easier, I just then created a table as well. So, I mean, while there's a lot of reports in PPO and tables and those type of things, you could obviously do something very similar here as well, where I created that. I can, from this report, drop down to the other report. and I can add more pages. So if I wanted to add a demo page for us over here, and it's then very similar functionality to what Daniel showed. So as I mentioned, this is not a Power BI demo in terms of Power BI functionality, but I mean, it's the same elements. I've got my tables over here, and I'm going to maybe do something similar to what Daniel did. So I want to pull in the projects based on the phase. So I'm going to pull that in over there. I want to see the count of projects per phase. I want to pull that in over there. And a couple of clicks from there, I can see the number of projects per phase. I can then decide, okay, well, I don't want a graph, I want a pie, or I want a, those type of things. And then all the functionality that Power BI gives you around being able to set, where you want the legend and what field captions you want, and whether you want the headings and those type of things. Slicers and those type of functionality are also available. So if I wanted to introduce a slicer, for example, put a slicer down. Oh, let me just go back there, sorry. Introduce a new slicer, put that in, and I want to slice this by department as an example. So by doing that, I'd then be able to create a slider, and I'd be able to say, okay, well, I only want to see projects that don't have a department, or I only want to see IT projects and those things. And then I've got all the Power BI functionality where I can start to do different stuff. If I've got different departments and different colors, I can do different legends, I can do different colors and those type of things. So I'm not going to demonstrate all the BI functionality. I think you get it, or those of you that have used this before, but it's as simple as creating those views and then using your Power BI tool to effectively publish those, and those can then be published onto any URL, shared with your audiences on Teams, put onto other portals and those type of things. So fairly easy to do. It took me about 3 hours end to end to build all of this using the underlying data model by having done the connector and pulling down those various tables. I'm going to pause there for a second and just check if there's any questions.
There's a question from Victor that with the screenshot to ask to discuss the model view. I think it's a Power BI. Yeah.
So Power BI, and I mean, once again, I'm not a Power BI expert or Fundi. I'm sure there's people on this call that have much more Power BI experience than I have. Power BI has got these 3 tabs on the side. So the first tab is the report. The second tab is the underlying data. So here's my project data in this case, and I can see all that. And then it's the underlying data model. When you pull the entities down in PPO, in my case, I pull down the project table, and most of you, I presume, have a fairly good idea of how PPO's data model works. So there are costs and there are projects. On the cost table, there's obviously a one to multiple relationship. So a cost record that sits in the cost table can only be related to a single project, but a single project could have multiple cost records. So this relationship over there, Victor, you can see is showing you that the ID in the project table in the middle of the screen is related to the costs using the project ID. So for those of you that are PPO administrators and have used PPO for a while, it's that project key that you see on all your entities, which ties your entities like risks, like issues, like costs, like all those things to the project. So the cost key has its own ID, which you're all familiar with, but to tie that cost ID to the project, we use that. So PPO inherently creates those relationships for you, and the same with the ID on the employee. Daniel showed you how to create the relationship to project manager or sponsor or owner or those things. Every tool that we tested handles these relationships quite differently. So we elected to keep it fairly simple and just have, the concept of the relationship, which you can then go and create. These tools allow you to manage the relationships and build the relationships and set them up. And this is once again Power BI functionality, where all I've done is, connected the cost ID on the project ID on the cost table to the projects and connected the employee to the project manager exactly the same way Daniel did. The functionality is exactly the same as Daniel demonstrated. You say on the issues table, I'm going to take the project ID, which is here somewhere, project ID, and I'm going to relate that to the project, to that ID. And all I've done there is I've effectively created a relationship between the issues and the projects, exactly the same way as I demonstrated before. So it's now created a relationship that says every issue can belong to one project, but one project can have multiple issues. So you can create those relationships using your Power BI tool, and those are maintained and saved. So in my working file, all of those are maintained and saved, and as I work through that. So a lot of these, like the relationships and those things that I've demonstrated and Daniel's demonstrated, are a once-off, and then off you go. These models are also real-time. So because it's connected, you could refresh it, and any changes that were made to the system, new data fields that were added, those type of things, PPO goes and refreshes it and brings back those new things. Here's an illustration of actually connecting, checking the data model, updating it, and bringing in the latest records for me. Those latest records are now once again in my data. So if I was to show you the issues table or the employees table or the cost table or those things. Victor, I hope you have answered your question.
You have. What just threw me off was when I opened it from I'm not a Power BI expert, so it looked like the other tables were just independent, and yet I knew that there's a relationship between them and the projects table. So yeah, now that you have showed it, I think, yeah, I'm answered. Thanks, Guy.
We did try, I'll be honest with you, when we initially deployed this, we tried to bring in all the relationships inherently, but some of the BI tools handled them quite well and some of them handled them very badly. So for the sake of releasing it and not sticking to one or two tools and giving our clients the ability to use any BI tool that they potentially have, the OData standard that we selected allowed us to expose this to basically any BI tool, because that's a very common standard that, you know, almost all BI tools support. But then we had to forgo the complexity on the relationships because some of those tools just handled it very badly, and we didn't want users to be battling with, you know, badly set up relationships, because that BI tool, for example, I'm not going to say which ones we battled with, but you know, that BI tool, for example, battled. So we decided to rather forgo that, keep the data model in place, and then the tool will let you create the relationship. I did notice as well, I'm not that technical myself, but I did notice as well, understanding the data model and having some understanding of database and relationships are important. So, you know, it's a great tool that users can use, and Daniel showed you how to do it in Excel, but I mean, ultimately you're working with you know, data sets. So I think it's important just to acknowledge that and have understanding of that.
Tadiso, I'm sure I saw your hand up. Was
Yes.
your question answered, or do you still have a question?
No. Thank you. I was hoping that maybe if you can publish it, and then so that it can be available as a Power BI service, and see how you are able to connect to see if it will still be able to connect to via the API online.
Yeah, so I can demonstrate that. I'm just going to go off screen quickly for a second. So what I did in our environment was I created that Power BI dashboard that I showed you previously, and then I published it to an internal Teams group that we have, just so that the entire team could see it and play with it. I'm just going to open up my Teams quickly and see if I can quickly find that, and then I'll demonstrate that to you.
Thank you.
So while Guy's doing that, it's just important for everyone to note that this feature really allows you now to publish your PPO data to non-PPO users as well. And it's non-static data. So like you saw in the BI tool, you can refresh it, you can change things. So you're working with the real data that you can adjust based on whatever your stakeholders' reporting requirements are.
Sorry, Jane, we published this. I published that link so long ago when we started the testing on this, and I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, but carry on.
While you're doing that, can I just ask if where do you store the underlying data? Do you store it in the cloud? And if so, what platform?
Yeah, so it's the same hosting environment as we have for everything else. So, I mean, our hosting provider, as all of you should know, is Amazon. So we host this data in that same environment that we host our production data.
And what framework have you got in place to protect personal information? For example, in PPO, it's got employee information. So how do you protect such data?
Yeah,
Is
so
that
we can
something that
yeah, we can share that content with you offline. I mean, there's a technical fact sheet which talks to the logical access control, the security, all those type of stuff. Happy that Taryn shares that. I think that's you again, Abdul. I'm happy that Taryn shares that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so very quickly, this is our internal teams that we use just to communicate and collaborate and these type of things.
You're not sharing, Guy? Just in case.
I'm sharing in a sec. So this is just the channel that we have where we talk about new features, and early June I went off and I built a dashboard and I published that link. So how that works is that link is now available to all our users that have access to the link, and it's basically using the Power BI app now, connecting, logging me on using my PPO domain user account and all the rest of it. So I'm in the web component now, I'm not in the Power BI tool. It's loading the report. So there's the same underlying one that I showed you earlier. This is just published now. So this is now available. So anybody in our business who has that URL, or I could share that or put it on any Teams group or any other platform, you know, has this ability now using this. So I showed you the raw data file that I created. This is the published version, and obviously you could then publish this to any platform, any browsers. We run this across our data set that we're using as an example, but then we've also got some internal stuff. So here's another example of one that we've been playing with internally. We have product ideas that come in. Hopefully you'll all log some new ones. So we see we've had X number of product ideas come in May, how many that we are new, how many we've done, how many we doing, how many we rejected. And this is once again also using the Power BI. So this is coming off our own version of PPO, where we're looking at all the ideas that came in. So this is the publishing side of it, to answer the question that you had around, how to see it and how the connectivity works.
I think the additional question would be the connecting to the data that's on Azure while we are here. Do you need to set up a gateway that connects through to your data sources so that your data is connecting live?
No. So when you're using the BI tool like Power BI that I showed, the person that's creating the report will create the connector, set it up, access the data, pull it down into the data model, and then publish. That's all that needs to happen. There's nothing else technically that you have to do, or any access that needs to be provided, or any gateways, or any of those things. We've tried to make it as simple as possible. I mean, some of the people on this call know me personally. I mean, I'm not a developer, but I was able to use the API key, create that Power BI, and publish it. So we've tried to make this as simple as possible so that it's not a very technical exercise. Remember, for some of you on this call who may not know, PPO already has an API, and we've had an API for 10, 12 years already. But that API is very technical. It's aimed at integrating to your HR system and your ERP and your financial data and those things. So a lot of clients have existing API calls already in place, integrating to other systems in their business, but that API is very technical. It was meant for technical integration. We had more and more clients using that to do BI stuff, and we just felt that they were then in need of an internal technical resource to go and get them to write, pull the data down, transform the XML, do all these type of things, stage the data, and we just felt there was an opportunity to make and that's why we like the word connector, a BI connector, which was non-technical, which made it a lot easier for our non-technical users to quickly go and do it.
I think what I wanted to ask again is that is it refreshable? How do you refresh it while you're online? The reason why I mentioned gateway is because sometimes when you've got your data sitting on premise on a SQL server, all right, you will create a gateway to connect so that your data sits on premise, and then you you've got your service that is running online. Now, with this one, you are using an API, which is sitting somewhere, right? How do you refresh your data so that you, when you open the dashboard, it provides you the latest information?
Yeah.
Because the way that I'm thinking about using this, obviously we've got different departments, right? So if we've got different departments, and then I want to send the dashboard each and every Friday, I would want to send the latest dashboard without me refreshing.
Yeah. So remember, yeah, so I think it's a good question, and let me try and answer it. And I mean, I know some of our technical team are on the call, and maybe they're going to jump in and help me, but we refresh the data from your live production environment into your BI environment every night at 3 o'clock. You saw that demonstrated before. When I built this Powered BI dashboard, I set the refresh when I published it to happen real time as well. So every time that this dashboard is pulled, in building this Power BI, when I published it, I mean, I can go and refresh it when I'm using it, but when I published it, I set it to run every single time. So when I get here, it's automatically. You can also go and refresh it yourself, I mean, in Power BI, but this dashboard runs itself every night, republishes it. I actually set in Power BI an event that said, if there's a problem with the restore in the night, let me know, and it sent me an email. And that was when I discovered that one of my API keys were deleted by a team member through that functionality. So the BI tool is taking care of that, in that when I published it, it's automatically refreshed.
Okay. Okay, no, thanks.
Okay. Remember, this is part of your core product. So we're exposing this to you today. We've got a blog article on this. We've got a video on this, which I think Taryn has already published earlier this week and can share with everybody on the call, maybe on the chat. But I mean, like anything in PPO, we want our users to start using it and playing with it and experiencing it and getting some value out of it. And if there's any questions or challenges or problems, you use the normal support channel, log your ticket, do your live chat to the team, get necessary help. So any of those things. We're not Power BI experts, we're not Tableau experts, we're not Click experts. You know, we'll help you where we can around the connection and those type of things. But it's part of your subscription, so we'll support you. So if there are challenges with data refreshes or those things on your side, please reach out, and as much as we can help on the PPO side, happy to do that.
Okay, thank you guys. Is there any other questions? None. Okay, so just quickly, I am going to launch a poll just for you guys. So please give us some feedback on this, so we have an idea of what you think of this new feature. The recording, of course, will be shared with everyone post the session, and the presentation that I covered when we started. So I will make available the BI fact sheet for Abdul that asked around security. I think the BI fact sheet does tackle it a bit, but I will attach the technical fact sheet as well, which covers security in more detail. There is a knowledge base, product news with a video, as well as today's recording. So all of that will be shared with everyone on today's call. And just so you know, Guy mentioned, we are introducing new functionality more aggressively. You would have probably seen that over the last couple months, you're seeing new things on PPO almost every week. If you want to get notified of these features, new enhancements, please make sure that you are signed up to the blog, because as we release, we publish some product news about that feature. If you're not signed up, you won't know about it. And of course, our next product webinar is focusing on data quality. The link here will give you access to register, and that's happening on the 31st of August. And I think that's it from me.